Okay, question one. What effect will the proposed federal Common Core and Common Majors have on the bubble?
None.
I'm actually a little worried about this, or perhaps. Is it working? Yes. I have some real concerns about this. And let me start with mathematics. When most of us went to college, the entry-level mathematics course was called Calculus 1, Lord save us. Now there's a phenomenon called college algebra, which is what we used to do in 11th grade, and that's really one of the more rigorous gen ed college math classes. What ACTA sees more often is something called college math, which is a strange amalgam of things, sometimes actually quite good, dealing with things like fair apportionment and voting and some creative things that are typically not in the high school curriculum. But increasingly, we see things that are really a repackaged combination of middle school and freshman, sophomore year mathematics. Ratios, decimals, fractions, you know, the things that I work with my, I was working with my daughter in, 2 years ago in middle school. If Common Core becomes the proxy for college readiness, and colleges are no longer able to say, look, that's what we call remedial around here, then we have continued to erode a standard that's absolutely crucial for the well-being of this nation. Let me throw out one other factoid. This one came from Harry Lewis, the former dean of Harvard. Harvard put a bunch of courses online, and then they did some metrics to see which were the most popular. And at the top of the charts was a course on abstract algebra, 340,000 people using it. So they really had to dig in and see. Almost all of them were in India. Oh, okay, connect the dots. And where are we going to be in a few years if we dumb down the entrance to college and then the exit requirements from college? So let me just throw that out. Vigilance. We need to be very vigilant about what we are calling college level work. And that applies not just in math. I'm using that as the key example. I showed you that slide of writing skills. Lord, save us if we continue to allow those to get eroded. Our employers will be sending their drafting to India rather than hiring American college graduates.
Okay, question 2. Is higher education too big to fail? Will the federal government step in?
I have a sneaking suspicion that it is, and the only thing that might keep the federal government from an enormous Chrysler GM style bailout would be the fact we just don't have any money anymore. The Obama administration has a lot invested in the higher education bubble. For one thing, it keeps people from adding to the unemployment rolls. Secondly, it means that young people will be exposed for a longer period of time to statist propaganda. So yes, I think they would like to try to keep it going, too big to fail, but I just don't think that it's going to work because we don't have the funds for it. There are too many other things, too many other plates in the air for them to keep this going for long.
I'm afraid to say that I think the federal government is already doing that and has been doing that. One of ACTA's major initiatives is to expose and to forever change the system of accreditation. We didn't really get into graduation rates. Andrew mentioned that, but in our What Will They Learn study, we certainly track the 6-year graduation rates. By the way, how did we ever get to a 6-year graduation rate? It's a 4-year graduation rate, and you're paying opportunity costs all the time. But that aside, we see a lot of schools with graduation rates, six-year graduation rates below 25%. Now let's factor in, transfers, so maybe that creeps up to 35%. The old joke, look to your left, look to your right, two or you're going to be gone. Well, it's not because of high standards, but, our dropout rate is one of the very highest in the world. Where are the accreditors? These 6 regional accreditors empowered with life and death power over colleges and universities by their ability to cut off access to Title IV federal student aid funds. This is actually the striking arm of the federal government in higher education, and they are doing diddly squat to protect the consumer or to protect the federal dollar. But they're doing a very good job of kicking the stuffings out of for-profit institutions, and some of them deserve it, but so do an awful lot of nonprofit institutions. And they are certainly keeping out the new providers who might be offering at low cost really excellent hybrid or online education. So to answer that question, I think I disagree, George. I think the federal government has been propping up a broken system for way too long. And once we can effectively sever access to federal funds, base it on much clearer and much more accessible metrics, and get the accreditors out of that business, we'll begin to see much more of a vibrant, operative market in higher education, with those institutions that deserve to fail, failing, and those that deserve a place in the sun, finding it quickly and efficiently.
One of the reasons the federal government is so enamored with higher education is because, due to some accounting shenanigans, they actually think they make a profit on right now. So to them, more students going to school means more money that they can spend on other things, and they do spend that money on other things. Half of the money they saved from reforming the student loans and as part of the healthcare bill was spent on the healthcare bill. So I think that's absolutely a danger, is that the government has a financial stake in propping this industry up.
Okay, thank you. Next question. I was getting to some of our standards here. How many college students read a serious book following graduation, one not required by work or formal education? Just a quick point on that. I've often told any employer that I could that one of the best interview questions that you can ask a recent college graduate is, tell me about the last book that you read. And it should enlighten quite a response. It's second to ask them what they studied in college, not what their major was. That could get some extra information. But I actually fear that as time goes on and more people get these credentialed degrees, the employers are also, they're kind of clueless in terms of what a true liberal education is, so they may not even know what to look for. So I'm wondering if anyone else on the panel has anything to add in terms of the intellectual curiosity of students post-college.
Some have it, most don't. College, well, starting much earlier, K-12. For many kids, it does little to energize their minds and get them to be active thinkers. They're patted on the head when they do okay to get the grade that will not cause trouble for the teacher to give it, which means an A or a B, nothing less than that. And so many young people who might have their brains turned on early on never get engaged. And they get to college, and a few of them may get engaged while they're in college. I had a few students like that. I said, I kind of walked through K-12, but gee, that course on economics is really interesting, and I want to know more. That happens occasionally, but I'm afraid that many college students just coast on through, never get an intellectual challenge, never become really engaged, and never want to read a book, never want to take a teaching company course in classical music or anything like that. Their brains just never get engaged, and that is the great opportunity cost of our failing system.
I wanted to pick up, George, on your mentioning the teaching company. Teaching company has made an extraordinary amount of money, and God bless them, they deserved every penny of it. which is a reminder to us that we are a very, very intelligent, curious nation, if only people will get out of the way and let that instinct take hold. You know, it was amazing to me. Bruce Cole, the former chairman of the National Endowment for the Humanities, used to point this out in his presentations. David McCullough's books were on sale in airports. You know, people were buying hundreds of thousands of copies of that big, thick, heavy book on John Adams, brilliant book that it is. You know, the fact is that good material, well presented and made accessible, is something that our public is hungry to have. And what a terrible, sad state of affairs that our higher education system, spending more per pupil than any other developed nation in the world, can't seem to take advantage of that and do it well.
Okay. Yeah, and in addition to Teaching Company, their iTunes U, the database of courses is growing. Khan Academy is fantastic, especially for some of the basic material. There's the TED Talks website. I mean, you could even go to YouTube and watch Milton Friedman's Free to Choose series, and there's so many different avenues out there. And I think the earlier we could expose the curious ones to that, the more we could create, even create some rebels on campus. So that was about the students at the end of their graduation. What about before? This question says, regarding college enrollment, in an average population of young people, what percentage are capable of and interested in an authentic, we'll say 4-year, college-level reading and writing?
Well, you know, one of the really important methodological points is that the plural of anecdote is not data. But I'm going to share an anecdote. My very first teaching assignment was at the University of Illinois, Chicago. It was a summer lectureship. I had the commuter sections. The kids would come in at 8 a.m. before they went off to their jobs. And my somewhat tired colleagues told me as I was trundling off to the library to set up a reserve shelf for the classical civilization course, don't bother. None of these kids are ever going to read anything that they're not absolutely required to read. You're just wasting your time. I said, well, look, you know, I just feel that I ought to do this. So after about 2 weeks, I went around to look at the little slips. That was before the electronic catalog, to see whether these books were being used. And they were covered on both sides. You know, these students had somehow been finding the time to come in and do the extra reading. And it was, you know, probably the best thing that could have happened at the beginning of my teaching career, to be brought face to face with the reality that students rise or fall to the levels of expectations that you set. We've seen this over and over again in K-12. The no excuses schools put themselves into the most desperately disadvantaged parts of this country, and they have excellent results. The KIPP schools, knowledge is power. You know, their teachers are carrying around beepers so that no kid is ever allowed to come into school with homework undone. There's a teacher on call. There are ways to make this happen. I know I sound like a broken record. The highest expenditure per pupil in the world, and we can't do a better job in our colleges and universities at, I recognize, remedying some of the anti-intellectualism that the colleges and universities have to receive, but still, that's our job. We got to make it happen.
Okay, here's a question that gets into that correlation between after college earnings and having a degree. I'll read it in its entirety. A college degree worth $10 million more over the lifetime. Does this statistic include the asset value or net worth of entrepreneurs who did not go to college? So I think it's just really getting into some of the intricacies of that statistic. What exactly does it include? Is it just wages? Does it include net worth, investments, and so on?
So I think the number that we most commonly see in the newspapers is around $1 million. And there's been quite a few essays, articles, whatnot, that have kind of improved on that number, I think. And they do so by taking into account the risk that students take. So the $1 million figure comes from taking the your wage as a high school graduate, the average wage as a college graduate, and extrapolating over 40 years. Well, that's okay. But there's a lot of variation around those averages. So when you take into account that some 20% of community college graduates earn higher than the average bachelor's degree wage, and there's a lot of bachelor's degree earners who earn much less. So when you take into account the entire distribution rather than just the averages, it turns out that the financial benefit of going to college is it's probably in the range of $300,000 rather than $1 million in additional earnings. So I think the overall point is, if you're capable of going to college and you can go to an affordable one, meaning not take out an obscene amount of loans to do so, you're probably better off doing that. But college is not kind of a golden ticket to a free $1 million. And I don't know that it ever was, but it certainly isn't anymore.
I don't like the whole idea of throwing out this statistic, no matter how carefully it's calculated. It's misleading. It creates the impression that the college experience, the degree you may or may not get, causes you to do better afterward. But we know that that is oftentimes not true. Not only is there no $300,000 or $1 million lifetime premium, there's none at all. What you have to think about is the individual. And here's where my Austrianism comes into play. We Austrians don't look at aggregates. We say, look at individuals. Well, that's what we need to do when it comes to higher education. It's foolish to tell any young person, well, on the average, if you get a college degree, those who have gotten college degrees in the past, let's be careful about that, have, on average, earned more. Does that mean that you, if you go to college today, will earn $1 million more over your lifetime? It doesn't mean any such thing. You have to think about the individual and his circumstances, not what the aggregates from the past data may be.
And actually, I wanted to share one statistic from BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics. Between the ages of 18 and 46, on average, a person changes jobs about 11 times. And a number of those will happen in the 30s and early 40s in a person's working lifetime. So once again, what George and Andrew have been saying is sort of writ large. Especially now we're in a very, very dynamic working situation, and making those predictions seems to be more than unusually fatuous.
Yeah, and George raised a good point, which is that these are two very different populations of students. So the students who tend to go to college and graduate tend to be more disciplined, more motivated, whatever, than the students who don't, and we'd expect for them to earn more. And one of the most interesting questions along this line that I've heard asked is by an economist named Brian Kaplan, and he asked, would you rather have a Princeton degree or a Princeton education? The fact of the matter is, Princeton education isn't going to open that many doors to you if you can't demonstrate it. But a Princeton degree is going to open a lot of doors for you.
Okay. Next question, and I like it in its use of adjectives here. So, economics is a factor in the bubble, but how much does the obnoxious PC indoctrination figure into that as well? So, what is a lot of the stuff that we're hearing in this conference about student indoctrination? How does that translate into the worth of the college degree now and in the future?
I think I referred to that as the buckets of toxic waste sludge that are left in the uncompleted homes without the roofs, the education that has not taught young people how to read, how to write, how to do basic math, but teaches them how to hector you all day long about social justice and sustainability. And as I said before, I think this is one reason why the higher ed establishment, allied with the Democratic Party, will try to keep this going as long as they can. It's in their interest. It provides wealth for a lot of their supporters. It provides the ideological grounding that they want young people to have. And that's part of the bubble. The statists in our midst want young people to spend as much time in the company of liberal academics as they possibly can.
Just add one other note. Academic freedom is neither a constitutional nor a natural right. It is a privilege that is given in recognition of the fact, or in belief, that the Academy is devoted to the pursuit of truth in an objective and responsible way. We are already seeing major assaults on that. Garcetti v. Ceballos is going to have huge implications for academic freedom in public institutions. Stepping back, as a later age will do, my guess is that the growing public skepticism over the Academy's integrity is contributing to the fact that the public no longer believes that privileges like that are appropriate. That's a very, very sad state of affairs, because at the end of the day, the freedom to teach and do research in a manner that's responsible and professional needs to be done in an atmosphere of safety and security. But we are in a contractual relationship, would that we knew it, with the public that sustains us. And that entails, on our part, responsibility. I just note that, in the history of the American Association of University Professors, there were supposed to be two committees. Committee A on rights, and that got started right away. And Committee B, which never really quite got off the ground, on responsibility. And it was remarked by the late Edward Shilds, wonderful scholar and humanist, that probably because in 1915 nobody in the Academy ever thought that they needed a committee on responsibility. They all sort of recognized what professional ethics were about. Well, here we are. And unless we get a handle on that fast, we're in grave jeopardy.
And I never thought I could use this in a positive spin, but the fact that our students don't learn sometimes actually makes me happy, because if what they don't learn is some of the drivel that's pitched to them, I'm happy. If they spend 4 years drunk, at least they have a beginner's mind when they graduate. It's just, I think that it's one thing that we do have to remember, that when we talk a lot about the indoctrination, there is a large percentage of people of students who are very apathetic towards intellectual pursuits. So you could just even look at our election, the amount of people that didn't vote. And so of the ones that are politically active, they're likely to be indoctrinated. But there is a whole bunch of students who really just check the boxes and get their piece of paper. And like I said, I feel horrible that that's a positive way to spin this, but it is another side to this. Now, I'm looking at the clock. We have 5 minutes left, and I think there's one question here that it would be a great one to end on, and I think everyone can comment on it, and that's, what is the post-bubble world likely to look like? I know Peter wrote a great piece for NAS on that, and I know that our panelists can, this is a good chance for them to end on a note and give their own stamp to that question. So what is the post-bubble world likely to look like?
I think the big change we'll see is that education will be unbundled. Today, and for hundreds of years in the past, getting an education meant you enroll at a particular institution, you take the courses offered there. The professors didn't actually have to compete with anybody. They got their students, whether they did a good job or not. Adam Smith mentioned that problem of incentives. The students were stuck with what was offered at their college. The big change will be students are going to shop around just like customers do for all kinds of other goods and services. They'll pick a course here, pick something there. Many options will be available to them. There'll probably be Zagat's-type ratings for college courses. They'll gravitate toward what is good, what is worthwhile, what fulfills their needs. They won't waste their time and money on sludge, and that's going to change the environment much for the better.
A lot of it's already happening. ACTA has been working a bit with Straighter Line, an online course provider. $49 a course plus an annual subscription fee, and if you go and look at those modules, good modules. That's a real college algebra class. It's kind that, at least I would fail without studying for it. There's real physics classes that you can take online with live tutoring for a fraction of the cost. This is going to really democratize high-quality education. We're seeing consortia popping up, low enrollment programs in Romance languages, which are in jeopardy. Many systems, sadly, have been cutting them. These are very often banding together to use online platforms to deliver courses that would otherwise not be cost-effective. And even a bunch of Ivy League schools are now sharing resources online to teach critical need languages. We do need to have people who can read Pashtun and Urdu and a whole host of other languages that are not commonly taught. How do you do this in a cost-effective manner? Use that technology that everybody's been investing in, and it not only saves costs, but it actually results in a higher quality education.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think one of the main things we'll see is an unbundling, and that's from the university's perspective. That's going to be an unbundling of the teaching duties from the research and all the other things that universities do. Simply because if you're offering the bundled product and somebody's only offering the teaching aspect, they're going to be able to offer it for a lot cheaper than you will be able to. So your demand's going to dry up. Now, some universities like Harvard are going to be fine because they get half their money from the endowment, half the other half from research. They don't need tuition. They can continue on doing whatever they want to. But for tuition-driven institutions, this is going to be a big change. From the student's perspective, I think one of the unbundling process will be much more. You're going to go for a very specific skill set. And this is particularly evident in the more rapidly changing fields. So for example, when I went through school, the statistical package I used was Stata and a little bit of MATLAB. Well, those aren't quite obsolete, but there's a new and better thing out right now. So I'm actually enrolled right now in a Coursera course teaching me the newest statistical program, R. And it's fantastic. And I know exactly what I need, and I'm getting it. And I'm getting it for free. I'd be willing to pay for it, but I'm getting it for free. So what does that entail for rapidly changing fields where you don't necessarily know what your graduates are going to need 10 years down the road? You need to be able to have them come back to you to get kind of updates as you go. And I think we're going to see a lot more continuing education, basically.
Okay. Again, thank you very much for coming out to this. It's 10:30, so we are at the end of this particular panel. The